Hello, my name is Jean-Pierre Maldonado, and today I will be discussing once again my research project and what I've been doing for the past semester about my research project for History 298. Now, one disclaimer, unfortunately, I cannot show you the PowerPoint presentation um, because unfortunately I don't have any projector or screen type of anything. The best that I can do is just review all the points that I was going to make in my presentation and then hopefully submit a copy of that and have that available for anybody to view it if they want to look at it while they're listening to this video. But in the meantime, I'll just get back to my research project and discuss what I've been doing for the past semester. So, in my last 4-minute presentation, I gave you a brief synopsis of what I was going to do for my research project, and I chose the Malmedy Massacre investigation. And to people who may be unaware of what the Malmedy Massacre investigation, this was a hearing in the U.S. Senate that took place on April or between April and September of 1949, and the court transcript was published in October of 1949, that same year, with the findings of what had been discovered in the trial of the German officers against the United States Army because of allegations that they made on the U.S. Army and what had happened. Now, I found a lot of my sources, not just the Malmedy Massacre investigation, but lots of war crimes trials reviews by historians. They discovered that there was a lot of similarities between these trials, as many Germans made accusations that the trials were set in unfair conditions towards them, that they were forcefully convinced by their interrogators that they had to confess to crimes that they supposedly did not commit, although there were plenty of witnesses that had survived the German army's wrath in Europe to prove that, yes, we were there, yes, we were victims, and yes, those are the men that did commit those crimes. And so, as a result, I did a little bit more of investigation into this topic because I found that for an event that occurred in the Second World War, Malmedy Massacre trial isn't really mentioned a lot in U.S. History classrooms. So I thought that investing time into this project was worth while. Now, before I do get into more information about the Malmedy Massacre investigation, I want to give you some information about the Malmedy Massacre trial and the event that's caused the Malmedy Massacre trial to take place in the first place. And this event is known as the Battle of the Bulge. Now, many people do, or at least have an idea of what the Battle of the Bulge was, but to recap on that, the Battle of the Bulge took place between 1944 and 1945, and the German army was sent to push the Allied Western Front back to the Western European coastline in hopes that if the Americans, the Canadians, and the British were pushed off the European mainland, then hopefully they would be convinced that Hitler's army and Germany would not give up unless the Allies agreed to an armistice or some sort of ceasefire. And as a result, it's one of the bloodiest battles that do take place, or it does take place, during the Second World War, and we see some severe losses on both sides. However, the German army eventually exhausted itself, and as a result, it could not put up a fight much longer. And that opened the Western Front to the Allies to push deeper into Germany and eventually force it to capitulate along with help aid from the Soviet Union in the East towards May of 1945. Now, the war is still going on in the Pacific theater, but for my project, I'm only focusing on the European theater and what happened. And as the Battle of the Bulge took place, there were some other grim events that occurred as well. I mean, the German army, it's only after like years, that we know that like the Holocaust and like we've invested research, but there are also other events that aren't really well remembered. And one of those events was the Malmedy Massacre. And this is one of the most grim tales ever to discuss because it involves the violent killings of over 100 American POWs that were at the mercy of around 77 odd German SS officers. And those officers convinced themselves that these POWs could not be taken care of or sent to a war camp for the remainder of the war, nor could they be released back to the Allied armies because they could uh, potentially release information or tell them of those positions. So they brutally put down every soldier by gunshot to ensure that none of them could escape and that hopefully nobody would ever find out about what happened to them. However, because this took place in December, those bodies froze over, and when they were discovered, autopsy reports found it that these men did not put up any fight, that most of them had been executed in a very vicious manner. And as a result, we see these German SS officers brought to trial in the Malmedy trial of 1946 between May and June. And all of the officers are convicted of what they did. Now, most of them are executed, but there's a remainder of them that do remain alive, and as a result, these officers say, hey, the US Army did not do a good job at the Malmedy Massacre trial because they made us confess to crimes that we did not commit because they interrogated us and they used acts of torture to get what they wanted, and as a result, we had to pay the price for something that we did not do. Now, that sounds a little bit outrageous, but at the time, uh, lots of these trials are taking place. And the Allied countries, they didn't have any precedent to consider or to look at when they conducted these war crimes trials. Much of it was off the top of their heads or just kind of thinking on their feet. And when an allegation like this comes up, it's not something that can be taken lightly. It has to be taken very seriously because it's no longer like a domestic dispute. This is an international diplomatic crisis. And as a result, we see the United States Senate involve itself in the Malmedy Massacre investigation. And so the US Army is put under investigation, and the US Senate decides that we need to have a subcommittee to prove that we are not giving any special privileges to anybody, no matter how American they may be or anything, just so that the trial can be put under fair conditions and we can conduct it in a very fair manner. Now, with that in mind, we also have to consider that in other trials we had seen that the Germans had this typical kind of behavior, so it only makes sense that the US Senate would involve itself just to ensure that they could understand what exactly happened and did these allegations hold any ground or any realness to their convictions. So the allegations, or at least at the end of the Malmedy Massacre investigation, the US Senate concludes none of these accusations hold. The US Army did everything in its power to conduct itself in an appropriate manner and to gain the information that they needed from these German SS officers about crimes that they did commit and that they were rightfully sentenced for because of it. And as a result, that event closes itself in 1949. Now, it only makes sense that not many people know about it because, other events are happening, the Cold War and all that stuff. But I think it was a very fascinating event. I loved researching into it. I wish that I could have done a little bit more with my research project because I feel like this is something that could take up a possible course in the I don't know, semesters that may come up in the future, but I think it's a wonderful event that most historians should give more look into and actually see what else they can find and prove about what were more implications, not just to like U.S. War history, but also to the U.S. Criminal system and its justice system as well. Thank you.